Joining us now, Axios co-founder and author of the new book, Just the Good Stuff, No BS, Secrets to Success, No Matter What Life Throws at You, Jim VandeHei. I'm not going to take it personally, Jim, that you're not in studio for me today, even though you were in studio with my friend Chris Jansing yesterday.
Well, next time for sure.
Let's talk about media silos. I know you have interesting thoughts on this. We're covering this trial. We're trying to get to the truth of what's happening. But there's a question of who else is actually watching this in terms of the broader electorate and what this will mean for November. I know there are people out there who have very strong opinions about this is a game changer for November. This should be on top of minds of voters. They should be paying attention to this trial. Others will say the exact opposite. There's a big middle out there.
Yeah, we're in this really interesting moment where, you don't have to go back that far. Let's say 10 years, where most of us were looking at the world through a very similar piece of glass. And it might have been TV, it might have been cable TV, a couple stations, and newspapers. But we were mostly looking at the same reality. And over the last decade, that's really shattered into like 20 different pieces. And each one of those pieces defined by your politics, your age, maybe how much you make, what type of job you have, and where you live. And so you could be sitting at a table anywhere, and depending on the age and location of people around you, you might not be getting any of the same information on any given day. Like if you're spending your day scrolling through TikTok, the issues you follow, the people that you know, the people that you trust, I wouldn't even know who they are. I don't use TikTok. And that person who uses TikTok might be sitting next to somebody who's on Facebook or Instagram who trusts a news source or an individual that person or I wouldn't be aware of either. And what happens is that you have a whole lot of different people, many of whom are highly educated. It's not because they're not paying attention or they don't care. They're just living in totally different ecosystems, and they're not interacting with the same even reality. And the real danger there is it's very hard now, really, other than like the Super Bowl, where you actually have a whole lot of this country watching the same thing through a very similar lens. And I think, listen, Donald Trump has benefited from this. There's a big chunk of his base that really only consumes content from podcasts that a lot of your viewers have probably never heard of, or not just True Social, but other obscure MAGA-like platforms, websites that would be wholly unfamiliar to them. In those ecosystems, the way they're looking at this trial is he's being persecuted, not prosecuted, right? They look at it like this is just it's Biden is animating it all, and it just gets them more fired up, And there's another side which looks at this for what it is, a real case, and a serious case being brought against a former president, and there's a real legal case, there's a jury, and so that I think explains why there's so much confusion and often a big lack of trust in what is real, and that's what scared me most over the last couple of years. It used to be people that just weren't paying that close of attention who believed weird stuff. Now it's highly educated people who I'm like, man, you think that's true? And they do think stuff's true, and that's an issue.
Well, it's also part of the reason why Congress is trying to get the Chinese off owning TikTok, because why have a foreign government own a piece of technology where a good portion of the population gets their news information? It can be very risky if you have somebody who could pull the levers. Let me ask you about something broader than just Donald Trump. One of the old adages that we trot out in the news business is that a healthy democracy needs a free press. It's essential to a healthy democracy. How do you have a democracy when not everybody is getting the same information?
I don't think it's hyperbolic to say that we're playing with fire. We really are. Like when you start to lose faith in all of your institutions, and we've seen an erosion of faith in every American institution over the last 20 years. People don't really trust the church. They don't trust the media. They don't trust government. They often don't trust now technology. You go down the line, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, like all of these things that used to bind us and bond us together. You lose faith in those things. And then you start to question the truth, or you only want the amplification of your own truth or what feels soothing to you you personally, where you're playing with fire is this is a complicated time in a complicated world. And there are moments where the public has to be able to focus on the same set of facts and say, listen, like, how big of a threat is China? How are we going to deal with it? Oh my gosh, this AI might be bigger than the internet, might be more important than the invention of the smartphone. Should we regulate it? What should we know about it? And you could go down the list. Oh my gosh, all of a sudden, because of technology, warfare is moving away from heavy artillery and boots on the ground, and it's moving to space and drones and satellites. So maybe those two big oceans on our shoulders no longer protect us. Should we maybe recalibrate how we think about national defense and what our risks are? And you talk about banning TikTok, which is, there's a real threat that the Chinese could take that algorithm and manipulate people at scale in our country. But they're already doing that. I mean, people need to be awake when I run into people, they're like, oh, I read that on Facebook. I read that on Instagram. Yeah. Like, dude, that's a pipe. And in that pipe is some really good content, and there's a lot of sludge. And it's not a source of news. And guess who knows that? The Iranians, the Koreans, the Russians, the Chinese. And what do? They create bots. They create fake accounts. We're not that hard to figure out. You know exactly what gets us at each other's throats, and they manufacture content that's meant to polarize us and ultimately meant to paralyze our Congress, because they know we're crushing them on the basics, right? Democracy and capitalism are far superior to their crappy styles of government. But if we just sort of get at each other's throats and we stop governing and stop believing in a common truth, then the bad things could happen.
You say we're playing with fire. It is scary. Jim VandeHei, honestly, and if you couldn't tell it from the conversation, one of the smartest guys in journalism and media. I'm going to plug your book one more time, Just the Good Stuff. No BS Secrets to Success, no matter what life throws at you. Jim, thank you very much for coming on and so eloquently answering those two very big questions.
Yeah, now that you plugged the book like that and said all those nice things, I'm definitely coming on set. So thank you very much.
Jim, thanks.